Hi, welcome back. So, I have something interesting to share today, which is a letter that my sister shared with me that one of her friends received from her child's middle school. And reading it, it was quite infuriating. It makes me think about why people say we're not indoctrinating children, we're not trying to groom them, we're not trying to get them to adopt any type of mindset. But then when you read this letter, you think, really? Are you sure? I'm having trouble believing that that is not what you are intending to do, because of all the information that is required under the California Healthy Youth Act, the one part that they very specifically ensure to call out that parents are not allowed to opt out of is the one pertaining to gender identity, gender expression. So you can opt your kid out of learning about sexual harassment, HIV and STDs and pregnancy and abstinence and abortion and everything, so on and so forth. And I just find that so intriguing as to why. Why is that? That all 7th through 12th graders are the ones that may not be opted out. Is it odd that that's the age group that are the most impacted by puberty, are going to be going through hormonal challenges, that are most impacted by peer pressure and have those challenges on a regular basis? Was there any thought in that? Or was it deliberate? And I'm asking these questions because I really don't know. Is it deliberate to introduce confusion, ambiguity, uncertainty into that age group? Any individual can have a number of identities, right? For example, myself, I am a daughter, I am a sister, I am a friend, I am a lot of different things, right? We all have different roles, different quote unquote identities that we have. But why is the one about gender the one that is so laser focused on? The one that is it has to be the one of the most central parts of us. And it's the one that is the most up for interpretation. If I were to say, no, I am not my parents' daughter, I am just an orphan, even though I was raised by my parents, even though I had both parents in the home, nobody would agree and say, no, Cindy, that's true. You are an orphan because you say you are, because that's your experience. A lot of people would have a problem with that. And they would say, no, your reality is actually that you had parents. But the gender one, no, that one is totally up for interpretation. That one is whatever the person feels. It is being mandated that regardless of you as a parent, regardless of what your thoughts are, your beliefs are, you don't have a right to raise your children to have any certain beliefs. That, as a matter of fact, California has a right to impose certain thoughts. Listen to what this guide says. Parents do have a general right to control their children's upbringing. But if parents choose to place their children in public schools, parental rights are generally outweighed by the state's interest in educating students and avoiding disruption in the school curriculum. When parents raise a specific objection to a part of the curriculum as violating their freedom of religion, so they are really honing in on religion. It doesn't even matter if it's a culture or not. They're just going straight towards religion. The school should evaluate the nature of the claimed burden on religion to see whether an accommodation is feasible. Schools may wish to excuse students from non-essential activities, such as excusing a Jehovah's Witness student from a Valentine's Day party. So you can give them an accommodation as long as it's non-essential by whatever the school deems is non-essential. but are not required to excuse students from curricular activities such as science or diversity education. So science and diversity education are now the same thing. They are equally essential. The interests of the school and student in education outweigh parents' interests in preventing their children from being exposed to ideas that conflict with religious traditions. So that is saying that we don't care what your religious ideas are. You don't have a right to instill those beliefs in your children. And because you have your child in a public school, what we deem to be educational and essential is going to outweigh whatever you have the freedom to believe in and whatever you have the freedom to instill and expose to your children. I mean, it's funny because we have a separation of church and state, but this goes beyond the separation of church and state. This is now the state saying, church, you have no ability or right to influence the minds of anybody regarding anything that we don't agree with, even if that means the parents. And that's a scary place to be. And it's especially scary for me as somebody who doesn't have kids yet, because I think if this is the state that we are in now, where will this be when I do have kids that are the age of going to school? I mean, right now I'm thinking I either have to put them in private school or I'm going to have to homeschool them. But there's so many individuals that they may not have that option. So what are they left to do? If they can't afford private school, what do they do if they can't homeschool them or if they can't put them in a private school? They have to just relinquish all control to California Education Code. They have to relinquish the values that they want to impart on their children as future members of society. So this is why I'm doing this, because I want to find out, what can we do? How do we right the ship? How do we get this train on the right tracks? What do we do until policy changes? The fact that this is being forced upon should be alarming to everybody, because there is no need to force truth, because the truth cannot be contained and it cannot be oppressed. It, because of the very nature that it is truth, means that it will always bubble up no matter what. But the fact that it is this incessant need to have every sector of society, and especially the educational institutions, validating and affirming and confirming and accepting and indoctrinating and perpetuating the idea that gender can be fluid, that gender is not binary, that gender is not associated to your sex that you are born with, is a giant canary in the coal mine of the direction that we are going in. And I know that the rebuttal will be, well, what's the big deal? It's not impacting you. You don't have any kids, or so what if your kid wants to be a different gender? Why can't you just accept that? Why do you care what other people do with their children? Why do you care about other parents? And if they're fine with it, then why does it matter to you? The reason why it matters, because it's an assault on what is true. And if we allow ourselves to embrace lies and eradicate what truth is, where does that lead us to? The fact that we have underage individuals who are having their breasts removed, who are having their genitals removed, who are chemically castrating themselves, who are sterilizing themselves, that is alarming in it and of itself. But what is even more alarming is what comes next. What are the next things that a child can consent to? And that is my biggest concern, that we are on the path of having children be able to consent eventually to relationships with adults. And you can say that that's conspiracy, that that's paranoia, but who are the big players in gender ideology? What were their beliefs and thoughts? you're going to see that there is a common thread amongst those individuals, that they did not see anything wrong with children having sexual relationships with adults. So I think it's on the other side to convince us that that is not where this is leading to. Because if you can say that a child can consent to lifetime alterations of their bodily parts, then how far are we from the argument that a child can consent to engaging in a sexual relationship with an adult? And I'm going to remind everybody again that when we look at history, anytime there were any atrocities that were conducted against any group of individuals, it was never one day over, it was never from day to night. There's always a systematic breakdown of those barriers. And we seem to forget that. We think, oh, if I was back then, I would have never done that. I would have never engaged in that activity. I would have never been a part of that. I would have been the person who fought against it. Are you sure? Are you sure you would have been that person? Or would you have been the person that slowly over time you said yes, 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 and you allowed that boundary to get pushed out further and further and further until you get to the point where you've been desensitized, so that when something atrocious is happening in front of you, you have already taken it in as this is normal and acceptable because you bought the lie. I believe we are all susceptible to being that individual. We all want to think that if we were at any point in history, we would have been the ones to have spoken up and been the revolutionary ones. That's not true. Because if it was true, if we all were like that, then those atrocities never would have even happened. And so what happens is it comes about with quiet compliance, little by little. And that's why this channel is called Speak Up or Submit. I think I'll end there. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely week.